All right, in this session, we're going to discuss building a more profitable practice because essentially, if you're running a business, you need to be thinking at least about making a profit.
Yep.
You may not make a profit every day or every week or even every month, but over the long term, if you're not making a profit, you're not going to remain in business, right? So, you should be looking at that, and we'll talk about some of the numbers that you should be looking at on a regular basis.
Right.
And some of those are different. Some are daily, some are weekly, some are monthly, some are quarterly,
Yep.
but you do have to do some of that. So,
And keep in mind that when we say profit, we mean, you're taking 25, 30% out for working there, but we're hoping we can get your overhead lower so that you're taking income, real profit out of the practice, not just getting paid for what you did, and you worked hard for every penny of it.
So overhead.
Yep.
That's kind of the good place to start, I guess. Your overhead cost. You think average overhead these days in most practices probably in the low 70%.
Yeah, I think the ADA said 67 to 75%. But with that being said, oftentimes when we look for data, people that gather data, sometimes, even if it's the ADA, the people that send their data in are people that have crappy practices. It's like, a lot of the people that are blowing and going, you would never see their data included into that database. But when we talk to doctors, I'm surprised that doctors actually think that a profit and loss statement is profit.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how do we measure overhead? Well, for most doctors, it's a piece of paper a CPA hands them 60 days after the month ends.
At least 60 days.
Yeah, maybe 90 days.
Sometimes more.
And that profit and loss is not profit at all.
Profit and loss is a tax
It's a tax document.
Basically.
It leaves out debt.
Yes.
It adds amortization, depreciation.
It only records the principal payment on a note. The interest goes somewhere else, and it's not unusual at all to have a doctor call us, and we'll have them forward us that information,
Right.
and we'll tell them kind of what we think, and they're shocked. Another scenario is that they say, I keep getting these reports from my CPA, and it shows that I'm making this money, I'm making this profit, but I hadn't written myself a check in 5 months.
Right.
Because what the CPA is calling profit is taxable profit, and it has nothing to do with cash flow and paying the bills.
Yeah, and again, so when I want you to get the mindset that we're going to use a profit and loss statement to look at a practice, but our preference would be to reformat it so that a profit and loss statement acted more like a cash flow, like your checkbook would, where you have money coming in, money going out, no matter where it goes.
That's pretty basic, and you really kind of want more coming in than going out.
Yeah, that'll work most of the time.
Yeah.
That was my whole goal in life, to make more than I spent, or than my wife and kids spent. Okay,
Because you were too busy working to spend it.
Well, and I wanted to live long enough to have the same lifestyle my kids and wife had. Okay, so, but anyway, profit and loss statements are a starting point to look at your practice. But you have to understand what we're looking at. So if we look at overhead, we have a tendency to want to dumb this down. You look at a profit and loss statement, it's going to have 30 to 50, 60 items on it.
Right.
It'll have postage, 0.001%.
Right.
It'll have, where the money came from. You got this much from the practice, I got this much from, and it says total. Okay, so if it were the end of the year, then you could look back and see what you did during the year, but it leaves things out. So what I want to do is recreate the profit and loss statement to create a document that you can actually use as a management tool, so that you can, we've talked about looking at numbers before.
Right.
Okay. I don't want you to have to look at 100 numbers. Maybe 10 or 12 at the very most.
Yeah.
But in an overhead scenario, we want to dumb this down into about 7 categories. Now, the last category is going to be anything that the corporation spends on the owner. Okay, your salary, your taxes, your continuing education, your malpractice. If you're writing off your car in a profit and loss statement, it goes down below. If you take a trip to go somewhere that you say it's continuing education, but it goes down there. If it's for the whole staff, it's up in the top.
Right.
Okay, so we got that seventh category, and it's all you. Okay, as well as any money that's left over after you pay all your bills. That would be yours too. Okay, but I wanted you to know exactly what your overhead really is. So the first category is compensation. So what's going to be, if we took a profit and loss statement, what categories would fit under compensation? Well, what I'm looking for is anything that is paid to a staff person. So it would be their pay.
To them or for their benefit.
That's a good point. To them or for their benefit.
Yeah.
Their taxes.
Taxes.
Of any type of benefit, including of maybe uniforms, continuing education, of food for staff meetings, of
Scrubs.
Uniforms.
Uniforms.
Anything that all that you spend for them is going to be included in that package of compensation. Does it include an associate doctor? Yes, it includes an associate doctor.
They're an employee.
They're an employee.
Yeah.
Does it include a hygiene? Yes, it does. And I realize that you're going to get information in articles you read that tend to leave the associate out or the
Taxes.
or the tax out.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not looking at this as a tax document. We're taking a tax document and putting it in a format that you can actually tell what in the heck is my cost for having staff.
Right.
And again, so if you've got some benefit like insurance, that would be included there. So anything at all you spend on there would go there. Now, assuming that we got everything on there, then that should be somewhere in the realm of about 25%. Now, Max and I disagree.
But wait,
What?
how are you going to pay an associate 35%, include them in the staff portion, and come out at 25%?
Well, as an owner, you kind of take what's left over.
Yeah.
If we actually looked at what you produced, part of what you produced is being used to lower that overhead.
Right.
Okay. Again, probably the going rate for an associate, and I don't know if this is something you wanted to talk about, but it is not a standard percentage. Okay? It's an algorithm. So if, let's say you had truly a 70% overhead, 70%. Now, the young doctor approaches you with, they've been told at dental school that they need to get 30 to 35%. Okay, but your overhead's 70. Now, let's say you were an associate and I said, well, Max, we have a 70% overhead. If I'm going to hire you to work in my office, I need to make some passive income off you, at least 5 to 10%.
Right.
Let's say 5%. Do you think that's fair? He's going to go, well, yeah, why would you hire me if you couldn't make at least 5% on my work? I said, okay, great. So the most I can pay you is 25%. But let's wait, okay? The 70% we're looking at now may not be 70% after you start, because I may have to put equipment that actually works in that last operatory. I may have to hire one more assistant, okay? So, I mean, again, we oftentimes get upside down in this. So, yeah, that associate is in there, and the cost needs to be factored in and looked at in a way that it reflects your true overhead.
And another point in that I try and always make with practices, or especially with these young doctors, is don't get fixated on that percentage, because there are too many other variables. Yeah, you might get 50%, but did you rather have 50% of a little number or 25% of a really big number? And
well, it's because they don't know what to ask for.
They don't know what to ask for. Yeah,
and the senior doctor has no way of telling them what to expect. In my practice,
especially if they've never had an associate before.
Exactly. I never paid over 25%.
Right, I know that.
But every associate that I had became a partner.
Yep.
Okay. Now,
and then they had equal access to the same equipment you did.
Yep.
They had equal access to the staff
and
that
patients.
you did,
Yep.
and they had equal access to the patient.
Unlimited number of patients.
Unlimited number of patients, plenty of new patients. I mean, they
up-to-date facility. Everything was okay. And their take-home in the first year might be $300,000, $400,000.
Yeah.
And representing 25% of what they did.
Yeah.
Now, would you rather take home the 400 or the 150 you were getting at 33? Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're a young doctor looking at this, you need to approach this. Look at a practice you're considering working for and see what the lay of the land looks like. Do they have a certain number of new patients per hygienist?
Yeah.
Is there overhead, because I've seen doctors pay 35% for an associate and their overhead's close to 75%, and then wake up 3 months into the deal going, oh my gosh, every time I write this young doctor a check, this is coming out of my pocket.
Right.
And
I'm
my
making
overhead
less.
will not,
Yeah, it doesn't. It
Work
doesn't
out.
add up.
No, it doesn't work out.
Doesn't add up.
So 25% is ideal. It's not a big deal if it's 26 or 27, but it can't be over 30. I mean, that's just is getting really at the edge of not being good. Now, you and I disagree about this because it doesn't matter how you do it, but we're trying to take a traditional P&L and putting it into a kind of cash flow deal. I always included, like if I hired you to work for my practice, a consultant, I'm going to put you under compensation. Okay, now why? Well, if I didn't employ you part-time, I do expect a return on my investment, okay? So you've got to perform, okay? I figure that goes under compensation. I also will put attorneys and CPAs or bookkeepers, and then I'm willing to make it go to 27%, no problem. About 2% is all you should be spending on attorneys and CPAs. So it doesn't matter what you do with it, but understand anybody you hire, if you hired somebody to, like you gave your accounts receivable to a factoring company or a collection company,
right.
That's a part-time person you're paying to do that. And so just understand that everything you do affects what you're spending on employees.
Okay, what's next?
Okay, how about facility?
Okay.
I may get these out of order, so we do it in a year or two. But generally, if we look at anything that's nearly always out of line, it's compensation.
Well, it's those first two it's compensation.
Yeah,
Followed sometimes closely by the
Facility.
second one, facility,
Yeah.
because they've built the Taj
Taj
Mahal
Mahal.
office that they've dreamed about all their career.
Right, and they've got a 30-year note on it, and
Yes.
It's crazy. Okay, so facility. This is a little counterintuitive. I wish I could come up with a different category heading than just facility, because it's not just rent. It would be anything almost physically that you have to do dentistry. So we've got the rent. We've got property taxes if you own the building or in a triple net lease. We've got insurance on the facility. We've got utilities. Telephone. What else? Computer. The cost of computers, new equipment would go in there. We even factor in, let's say you're a young doctor, you just bought an existing practice. Okay, the payment for that existing practice went under facility.
Right.
Okay, so it's a little counterintuitive, but when you look at it, it should run around 7 to 9%. Okay, total. Okay, so we got about 25 for compensation, about 7 to 9 for this, and the goal numbers out here will get you somewhere between a 50 and 58% overhead.
Right.
So these are your benchmarks, what you're shooting for. You can't hit a target you can't see. Anything else about facility? Yes, there is.
Repairs and maintenance.
Repairs and maintenance.
Could be one.
Internet. But to make the point, the nice thing about staffing costs and facility costs, we already said that sometimes those are usually compensation, but those are the two top ones, is they're a fixed cost. It doesn't matter whether I did $50,000 a month or I did $150,000 a month in collections, the amount I pay for the facility stays the same.
Right.
Okay, so as a percentage though of what I pay,
It's going to fluctuate.
it goes down the more we produce.
Right.
So again, if you have your compensation or your facility kind of way out of line, then producing more and collecting more can correct that in pretty short order. So,
Well, that's a good point. Tie it back to collections. If you're collecting 100%, then you're getting a pretty good reflection of what your overhead is.
exactly.
Right? If you're collecting 95%, then every category of overhead is going to be higher.
Yes, because it takes more dollars coming in to pay that off.
Right.
Now, if you brought in an associate leading to a partnership and they wanted to buy in, A practice that has a lower overhead is worth significantly more
Right.
than one that has a high, because for every dollar that young doctor makes, less of that dollar goes to servicing that note,
Right.
and the overhead is more to take home.
Right. So third would probably be lab.
Lab, okay, that's a
Lab
great
cost.
one. Okay. So as we, the trouble I have is that, it's, what's the cartoon where the dog's running around and he gets fixated on a squirrel? He goes, squirrel! And he can't take his eye off the squirrel. Okay.
It's distracted.
He's distracted. Yeah, more than distracted. I'm distracted by numbers because every one of these numbers means something to me. So let's say lab should be around 8 to 10%. Now, should be 8 to 10%, even if you're paying $70 for a Empress or a zirconium crown. Even if, and you can get them for 40. So it's not necessarily what you spend, it's what you produce here. Okay, but let's say the lab wasn't 8 to 10%. Well, that's going to mean something to me, and since we're talking about a profitable practice, okay, if it was 5 or 6, then my first thought is you've got a CIRAC or E4D machine, a machine that you're making your own crowns.
And you've got it miscategorized.
And you've got it miscategorized.
Because it
should
be
go
under
under
lab.
It shouldn't be as long in the materials too. But let's say you don't even have that,
Yeah.
and it's still 5 or 6%. Now it's making me think, okay, why would it be that low? Okay, there's only several things. Okay, let's say he's in a demographic. We pull up the demographics, and the average age is 30. Well, then the average patient isn't going to need crown and
Not a
bridge.
lot of crown and bridge.
Okay, let's say we pull up the demographics, and the average income level is 37,000. Okay, now they can't afford crown and bridge. That could be a reason not to do a lot of crown and bridge. Let's say we pull up the demographics and they're super wealthy. They don't need crown and bridge because they take care of their mouth. Okay, I mean, so...
Or you're timid about presenting crown and
Okay,
bridge.
yeah, and now we come internally, right?
Yeah.
Okay, part of being able to help people want what they need, okay, it's real obvious most of the time. Okay, you need that crown. Okay. Now, I can either persuade you that you do and you want it, or I do a poor job and you think I can put it off. Okay, so that hinges on these systems and protocols that we create with staff, and then the physical systems and protocols, and then being able to deliver that with a patient in a way that they can understand. Okay, so if I see a low crown and bridge, I'm thinking, one, since most of the new patients come through hygiene, that the hygiene department is not doing their part of helping those patients want what they need. In other words, they've had an hour, hour and a half with that patient. They have the greatest amount of time with them. They've got a little sharp pointy instrument. They're going to find things that I'd never locate in a few minutes.
Right.
Okay. They're not doing their part of why I hired them. Okay. Again, we hire staff not just to suck spit, but I mean, really it comes down to really one word: inspiring our patients. I mean, yes, you spend time cleaning up a room, seating a patient, getting him to go out, stuff like that. But really, your job is inspiring that patient.
Right, right, yeah.
So lab can reflect that.
Yeah. So, marketing?
Okay. Marketing. It is, the wrong way to look at marketing is that it's an expense. It's a very, it's an investment. And it's clearly one of the best investments you can make to increase the productivity and profitability of your practice if done correctly.
Right.
Okay, so yes, you should be spending 3 to 5%. That's your goal. That may not be enough where you are. I mean, it may be that the competition is so dense that you've got to spend more to attract those patients. It might be that you just have a brand new practice and you have to spend more initially to create enough momentum and validity in the area that you practice in, so that you can back off a little bit.
Could be seasonal. If you have your ups and downs seasonally, and you have to, if you're anticipating a dip, you would want to spend more ahead of that dip to try and even it out a little bit.
Right.
And maybe less in the naturally good months, like typically, the back to school months, usually pretty good month for most practices.
Well, I find it strange that doctors will call me on Fridays. It's always Friday. They never tell me their name. And they say, Mike, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that they will always call me when they have a crappy month.
Yeah.
And I said, well, have you had better months? Oh, yeah. In November, I got 90 new patients. Okay, let's talk about that month. What did you do right 6 weeks ahead of that or 2 months ahead of it to make sure that you had a good month?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's all about, again, staging, planning, being consistent about marketing, consistent about your systems and protocols, partnering up with your staff to make this happen. But it all matters here. So
It does. It does. Office supplies and sundries to run the office?
Yeah, I have trouble sometimes figuring that out. Okay, now
That for me has always kind of been, well, if it doesn't exactly fit here, if it doesn't
Yeah, it's a
exactly
dumping
fit here,
ground, you know.
we'll put it in that bucket.
yeah. Now on a P&L, you might find it under miscellaneous,
Yeah?
or you'll find it in office supplies, but it should be less than 2%. So if it's over 2%, I would want to go back and look at the checks that were written in there. Now keep in mind, if you're not using QuickBooks or Peachtree or some accounting software and coding these checks yourself, I mean like fitting these in, oftentimes you'll have a CPA who thinks they know what this check is for.
Right.
Okay,
They assume.
but they, and it's not that they do it on purpose, they just put it in the wrong location, and all it takes is an explanation to them and it fix it. They fix it. So anyway,
And then lastly would be dental supplies.
oh yeah, dental supplies. Okay, now I don't know why whenever you mention a topic I think of the negative things. Okay, you know I must be a glass
I have
half
that
full.
effect on people.
Yeah. Okay, so dental supplies, I mean, I see people sometimes spend an inordinate time looking at these overhead deals, thinking that if I pay less for my supplies, this is going to drastically change what I take home. Okay, now, again, overhead is a function of what you produce, not necessarily what you spend. And yes, I believe that you ought to go find the lowest. If you're buying apples, buy them for the lowest price. Or you're buying Cheerios, buy them for the lowest price you can buy them. So you need to shop that. But it should run around 6%. I do see that just kind of drift over into a 7 to 8%. And if they did $1 million, that could be, 10% is, 1% is $10,000. Then that's maybe $20,000 a year that they could have put in their pocket if they'd shopped better. But the dental supplies, generally, when I see them over that, I start to think, who orders supplies? Okay? Who orders supplies? Yeah. And if it's more than one person,
that's a problem.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
Now, if it's one person, it's still a problem. I mean, it's still high.
Yeah.
And then they don't have a budget.
Yes.
Okay, so if you had $1 million practice, which is $83,333 a month, and you were willing to spend 6%, which would be around $5,000, give or take, then her budget would be $5,000. Yeah. Now, failing that, then I'm gonna make them do a purchasing order. I'm gonna make them show me what they found for a price, show me what they're gonna order, and I say yes or no until they learn how to do this themselves. The last thing about supplies is they don't organize them well.
Yeah, so that they don't
realize
realize that
know.
they're
Yep.
about to run out and they have to pay top dollar to get
Exactly.
it there the next day.
Or it's in a different room or a different box.
Or it's in a different room, different place, lost.
Yeah.
They're not keeping track of the dates on things that expire.
Exactly.
Another thing in defense of the person who's doing the ordering
There's no
is
defense.
when you go through that list, it's, the doctor wanted this and the doctor wanted to try that and the doctor wanted this other thing and,
Good point.
the associate wanted a different kind of impression material and a different kind of burr and blah, blah, blah.
Okay, what within the associate? Clear that up. Associate comes in to work with you. This is your burr block. You don't get a choice of burrs.
Or handpiece.
Our handpiece, our impression material, until the two of us decide that there's a better choice, and then we use up all the other stuff, and then we do that. From a solo practice, I see doctors spend an inordinate amount of time on non-major things. They're fixated, well, it could be that they're not fixated at all on numbers, but they tend to look at the wrong numbers, or they look at, well, if I only had that 3D cone beam, if I only had this or that, that would push me over the top. That's not the way it works.
And if you want to do that, we strongly suggest that you be able to write a check for it.
Yeah.
Don't get caught into these 10-year leases.
Yeah.
Because you're going to end up paying, at least twice what the machine costs.
Yeah, well, if it had been a Cerac, you'd already be on the third iteration, and the first one doesn't even work anymore by the
Yeah.
time you paid it off. So.
Yeah. So interesting. All right. So you talked about budgeting there. You kind of flew by that, you know,
Yeah.
and you don't have to overcomplicate this budgeting thing. It can be as simple as it's the first of the month. You've got a $5,000 budget. You take a piece of paper, you write 5,000 across the top, and every time you order something, you subtract.
Well, let's budget.
You know, and if you run out on day 10, it's going to be a long month because you don't have any more money to spend.
Right.
You know.
Right. Generally, I see doctors where they've run through. They get more credit cards, but they run through, and they have this revolving credit that they never pay off.
Yeah.
To support their lifestyle and their practice, if they just go back and it is all about fundamentals. You know, there's not this higher level of practice. It's a higher level of doing the fundamentals extremely well. I mean, you know, it's not. Let's say, for example, we want to budget compensation. Okay, we want to budget that. Okay, it's 35%. Should be 26, 27 because we've included the CPA and stuff in there. And we're trying to get the staff to really understand that purpose-driven, doctor-led, staff-owned mentality. So we're involving them in letting them see the numbers.
Oh, that's an important point.
Oh, okay.
You know?
So I'm going to share the numbers with them, either in a percentage or. Why do you think doctors don't want to share the numbers?
Because they're afraid for the staff to see how much they make. But what they don't know is that they already think you make more than you really do.
Yeah, a lot more.
A lot more.
Okay, and so again, let's just present this to the staff. Okay, staff, this is our challenge. Okay, we've got 35. I want to pay you more than anybody else gets paid for what you do. Okay, but it's got to fit within this framework of a sound business strategy. So,
which has the ripple effect of they stay 15 years. If they're making more than they could make anywhere else.
Yeah.
You know?
But I've got to give them a game. So I want to do it. I want to do a bonus and stuff like that. But we've got to get the overhead down there. What are our possible options to do that, staff? Well, there's not that many answers. It's like, one, hey, we could fire somebody. Okay. Two, we could lower everybody's pay.
Everybody's rate could go down.
Three, we could actually collect what we actually produce. Okay. Or four, why don't we produce more? Okay, who do you think they're going to vote for? Let's produce more.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's kind of what we're talking about, being more profitable, is that production with those fixed overhead costs. I mean, yes, the lab might go up a little bit, but very small compared to the amount of money you're bringing in, where, again, the staff is going to eat up at least 25%. So
Right.
everything can be budgeted. And again, it's the Hawthorne effect. What you measure gets done. The minute you start looking at it and sharing it without even a real strategic plan to fix it, it'll start fixing itself. It orders your brain where, you know, if it were new patients we were talking about and you wanted to get more, all of a sudden you'd see opportunities to maybe leave your business card when you eat out to dinner, or you know, you'd ask somebody for a referral, or you know, without even spending money on it, all of a sudden you start seeing these opportunities to get more new patients in. So.
Yeah, you know, and as hard as we might try and want to be strictly practice consultants, coaches, you know, it's inevitable that we end up being kind of a life coach, a life consultant as well, because all the same stuff applies to your home situation as well.
I rarely see a doctor who's, I mean, let's use a really, you know, like they throw instruments and cuss at their staff. Okay, they're not very nice people to be around. They're not very nice at home either.
Yeah.
Or if they struggle with finances in their business, they have troubles at home.
That's right.
You know, and so again, these are life choices, and it's almost like, you know, rebooting and reprogramming a piece of hardware to the highest level of software that it'll take, just makes everything run better, you know, and so it's kind of a do-over button. You know, and as you get older, I mean, it's bad because the young doctors think, well, I've got a bunch of do-over buttons, so I got
lots of time.
Lots of time, and I'm going to take these risks. That's the wrong attitude. Or you look at the doctor that's in the middle, he's going, yeah, it's been really crappy up to this point, but I'm going to turn it around. You know, it's that kind of that one, the one and only mentality where I'm not the guy that's going to get cancer. I'm not the lady that's going to go through a divorce. I'm not the guy that's going to declare bankruptcy. And then you look at the guys at the end of their career, they're going, if only I had saved the money, hadn't successfully ended 3 marriages, paid off my debt, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
So it is life decisions.
Paying off debt is important, but so is saving, and if you start that when you're young, not when you're as old as we are, that's a problem, but if you start when you're young, you have that miracle of compounding interest, right?
Yeah, I thought it was, it's interesting as you get older and then look back, because Max and I are getting a lot closer to our use before date than our born on date, but I remember my kids, I got them a little box with three little deals in it. It was like God was 10% savings, and then
Spend.
Mine,
Yeah.
The spend deal like
My
that.
money, yeah.
And they did that, and they had jobs and they did it and everything. I mean, I'm amazed that my kids now still do this. And I think they were about 12 when I started putting away IRA, and I tried to explain it to them at 12. Okay, that's hard for IRA. It's hard to explain this to doctors that are 40. But I went, look, I'm going to put, and at the time I think it was like $2,000 or $1,500, but I said, look, I'm going to put $1,500 a year in this account. So you have a Social Security number now. If you were to save that from 12 to 20, so 8 years, okay, you'll have this much money, and at current interest rates, it'll be this much more. Now, if you stopped at that point and never put another penny in there, and your best friend at age 20 started putting money in their IRA, they would never catch up with you. The miracle of compound interest makes that work. And so few doctors understand debt and budgeting and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was explaining that to a young doctor one time. I think he was 2 or 3 years out of school, so he was approaching 30, and he was doing pretty well. And so I said, you can do the math on this as well as me or anybody else, but if you can figure out a way to put $10,000 a month in savings between your 30th birthday and your 40th birthday, you can stop there, and at age 65, you can take out $10,000 a month for about the next 50 years, and you won't live that long.
Yeah,
forever, it's amazing what
how
that
this
does.
works. And most doctors, I mean, if we're planning, you need to look at it this way. You're going to have enough money to almost duplicate what you were taking home after taxes when you worked. It does not get less expensive when you stop working. And yes, you should have paid off your debt. Yes, your kids are out of school. They get out of school, you need to change the locks on the doors so they can't come back. You're not going to have these boomerang kids coming in. It's all of these things work, but you can only count on about 5% after tax of the money you've saved that you can spend. Okay, so your house is worth nothing. It's until you're dead or you sell it.
Right.
You're going to have to buy another house, so it's really, it doesn't matter. That chunk of money, if you had $2 million, you've got about $100,000 a year after tax to spend.
Right.
Can you live on that? Okay. Now we're talking to the 50 or 60-year-old. They're going, well, heck no.
Yeah.
How much have you saved? Nothing. Okay. So you have $4 million. That's $200,000 after tax. Can you live on that? Well, surely anybody could live on 100 or 200, but not at the level these people have done. So having your lifestyle, there's not any amount of money you can make that you can't outspend. And letting your lifestyle,
I've heard
your
you call
burn
it
rate.
Burn rate.
Your burn rate's really too high. I've had doctors call me, Mike, I want to build this forever house.
Yeah.
They're 42.
Yeah.
And then they've got great practices. I said, can I afford that? And I look at the numbers and I said, well, yes, you can afford it, or you certainly could spend that money and you could service the debt, but you can't really afford it.
Right.
Okay, it's not the cost of the house. It's the fact that now you're living in a gated community. You're no longer driving the right car. Your kids don't go to the right school. You don't belong to the right country club. It changes your lifestyle to outstrip that. So yes, you could afford, if we just did the numbers, to buy a house that costs that much. Would I suggest that? No.
Yeah. Is it a good idea?
No, it never is never a good idea.
All right, so let's say you've got somebody, you've got them in a practice, they're doing most things the right way, or maybe they're saving some money, they're doing some marketing, the practice is growing, they've got their team on board, they're doing this, hiring a hygienist. Eventually, they're going to need another doctor.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the pros and cons of bringing in another doctor, when to do it, how to do it,
Okay.
those kinds of things.
Yeah. And now, before we start talking about associates,
Okay,
okay, let me go back to these benchmarks or key practice indicators. We kind of talked about the overhead items,
right,
but there are other key practice indicators.
sure.
Now, that fits really hand in hand with bringing in an associate. So, and I may not give you every one of them. If I forget something, tell me, or if you can think of another one. But one's going to be location. You know, are you in a location where you could grow the practice at least, 40 or 50 new patients per doctor?
Per month.
Per month. At least 30 to 30 new patients per month for each hygienist you have. Without having the right location, associates won't work. Now, location could also mean the actual physical part. Do you physically have a facility that could take on 2 doctors working at full capacity?
Right.
Okay, so we're going to need at least 1 operatory for each hygienist. And I feel like after you get about 4 hygienists, you probably need 1 extra room just as a swing room for the
Right.
4. Okay. On the doctors, you need to have at least 2 per doctor, and then maybe 1 swing room between the 2. So there's 5 there. So let's say you're an average doctor. you've gotten 2 times the number of hygiene hours as doctors. So now we have 2 hygienists for the 1 doctor. You've got a couple at the front desk and a couple of assistants. Now you're thinking about hiring that associate. There are certain key practice indicators that we want to make sure kind of fall in that range. Okay, so one was location. Now, location can also mean competition. Okay, so we've got a ratio, ideally, of 1 dentist per every 2,000 people. That's hard to find.
It is.
It's almost impossible in a city,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's almost impossible in a city to grow a practice to the level we're talking about. To have this consistent, 15, 20% growth every year for the rest of your life while you're doing it. Okay, so location can make a big difference. If you've been in the same location more than 10 or 15 years, there's a chance you're in the wrong location.
The demographics change.
Everything changes.
Everything.
Yeah, you get old, the population gets old, race demographics change, income demographics change, educational level changes, everything changes. And so you're trying to stage this and set it up with the greatest chance of being successful of bringing in the associate. Okay, now let's look at production. We were talking about profitability a moment ago. Production. We need to see about $20,000 to $25,000 worth of production per employee. Okay, now the biggest mistake I see in keeping an overhead, especially in the compensation, is that the production per employee is average I think is about 14, I think is what I see.
Yeah, that's about
right.
right.
But I see it at 8 or 9. So there's far too many employees for the amount of production we're doing.
Underproducing
Are overstaffed.
or overstaffed, yeah.
And so sometimes bringing in associates is the perfect time to correct this.
Right.
So instead of hiring more people, we reallocate those people
Right.
to make those numbers work. Now, it works the same with number of operators. We're talking about if we had a solo doctor with 2 hygienists, and we're quickly going to need 2 more, let's say in the next year and a half, if we bring the new doctor, we're going to need somewhere in the range of 8 to 10 ops. Okay?
Or changing those hours.
So that you can you compensate for it.
Right.
Yeah, then that'll work for a while.
Right.
Okay. Or you expand your hours.
Yeah, that's usually true with the first doctor
Yes.
that you bring in. You can make that work for a while, but when you get ready to bring in another one, then something needs to change.
And these are all good problems, okay?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just trying to make you proactive about anticipating it.
Right.
So let's say you look and your production per employee is only 14,000. You're not ready for an associate.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, production per op. Say average office has 6 ops. You need to be able to produce around 25 to 30,000 per op. Okay, so again, all I'm saying is, let's say you did $80,000 in the month, and you had 6 ops. That's more like 11 or 12,000 per op, and not 25 to 30.
Right.
So it's not saying that you are a bad person or a loser or anything if you don't have production of 20 to 25,000 per employee or 25 to 30,000 per op. It just means that you do not have a capacity blockage there, and you can produce a lot more with what you have, even if you're solo practice. Now, let's talk about total income coming from a solo practice. I rarely see a practice that does less than $120,000 a month with a solo doctor really needing or being able to confidently bring in another doctor? There is a level of productivity that you have to get to really understand marketing, to understand budgeting, to understand profitability, to understand staffing, how to hire them, train them, onboard them, and everything. And you ought to easily be able to do 120. Now, with that being said, another benchmark is going to be your hygiene department should be bringing in about a third of the production. So if you did 90,000 a month, about 30,000 should come from the hygiene department. Now, if we look at hygienists, because they're the only other normal income producing person to practice and control what they make, they're going to need, I mean, I think, what do you see as an average production for most hygienists?
I'd say it's probably around 800-900 a day.
Okay, well, I was going to say 10 to 11, 12,000. Okay, a month. Yeah, I mean, but again, I've seen it more, I've seen it less, but an average practice can't have an associate. It won't work.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm thinking that a hygienist should be able to do probably in the range of 15 to 20,000 a month. Now, whether you want to use that as unadjusted net production, because we have so many PPOs, or correct it, it's got to be more than most practices have. So again, they've got to bring in, after production, about a third of the total production. I still see it running over 33% in a lot of offices, even with the correction for PPOs. So you can do that. The problem is it just takes more. The ripple effect of paying them hourly, and this is, I got a telephone call last night, and it kind of upset me, because it seems like as doctors, we're dealing with an ever-increasing overhead, and an even higher inflation rate than national average. I mean, it's 2 times faster in healthcare than it is national, and we suffer because we're trying to pay someone a fixed salary when we're not being reimbursed anywhere close to what 25 or 35, 40% less than we did, and we're still paying them the same amount.
Right.
Okay, there has to be a point at which those associates and those hygienists that can control that need to feel the pain. We can't continue to pay them more and more if what they do doesn't mean this much more money. Okay, it's part of the formula that it takes to get this associate in. So an income level of at least $120,000 a month, I think, would be good. If the hygiene did 30%, then that'd be around 40,000. It'd be 80,000 for the doctor. Okay. Now, let's look at it by hour. Average practice is about 350,000 per hour. You need to be 1,000. Yeah, you need to be somewhere between 8 and 1,000 at least. 800 and 1,000.
Yeah.
Just to make this work.
And an associate's not going to be there.
Not at first. Now,
Not at first,
I have seen the rare case where you take a seasoned associate that's been out 2 years, they want ownership, but they can't, and they want to come in and be an associate leading the partnership, and these people can crank it up, maybe better than you can, and it's not a bad idea to have somebody that challenges you a little bit. Right. But again, that $800 to $1,000 an hour production needs to be there, okay? And again, there's this, I don't know what the right word would be, but there's this, I'm supposing, or I'm assuming that you have the ability to take whatever you're doing and scale it. Number of new patients, scale it up over a period of 3 to 6 months. I mean, like double it, raise the productivity a great deal, and then hiring at the right time. Timing's always a big deal, at the right time, so that we keep that production per employee of around 20,000. Okay. Anything else? I love talking about associates, so we could talk 5 or 6 hours about that. So.
Well, I mean, I think you mentioned it in passing, is that it's always been our goal not for you to have a quote-unquote traditional associate long-term, right. But bring these people in that have their own goals, right, of being in an ownership position. I know that's exactly what you did in your practice, so you're removing equity from the practice as it's still in growth mode.
At the highest value point.
At the highest value point.
And then I'm reinvesting that. I'm not spending it, reinvesting it, and it makes a huge deal. But we're in a different time than I was when I first started doing that.
Right.
It still works, and it's still a strategy I would use. The trouble with a really good doctor is that if you get the right, I mean, like aggressive, good looking, great communicator, great clinical skills, you know, they're going to stay 15 to 24 months. They're going to want ownership. So if you want to keep that kind of doctor, you're going to have to give them a game to play that they feel confident about. If you're just okay with an average associate, which can be a lot of problems too, you can find associates that will stay. The tipping point in corporate America, you know, like these large corporate practice, has been that we've had more and more students graduate, you know, like 6,500 now. Yet their cost of education and their debt in education has gotten higher. It's from 350 to over 500,000. They come out, they need a job, and now we have 52% female enrollment. We're looking at statistically over the last 15 years, when we look at the number of dentists who graduate and then own a practice, it's gone down every year.
Right.
And so currently we have the male doctors, 67% of them will have ownership. In the female side, only 32%. Now, I have a daughter that's an attorney in a family that for 7 generations, all the males were attorneys. Okay? She's married to a pastor, and she's got 3 kids under the age of 10. Okay? And she works part-time. The reason corporations are doing well, and the tipping point that this has created, is they have an unlimited number of doctors, over 50% of the graduates, that will never have ownership in a practice.
Right.
And they're happy with that. That's generational, where people, you know, really just work to live. They don't want to deal with all of the leadership and management deals. And again, that could spell the end of the independent practice of dentistry if we don't turn that around a little bit. So
It's true.
okay, I'm off my soapbox.
So, you know, to talk more about the influx of group practices operating under DSO structures and corporate practices. I know we've seen that over the past few years. You know, it's not unusual to go into a dental school and, you know, if there are 86 graduates that year, 85 of them are going to work for one of these entities, and one is going to go work in their dad's practice. You know?
Right. And 2 of them are going to go into dentistry. They go,
That's right. Yeah.
What was I thinking?
Yeah,
You know, the
yeah,
Dr.
we're
Phil
getting out,
moment.
so.
Okay, yeah, I mean, the corporations are not bad. I mean, you know, we've seen recessions, we've seen the rise of insurance, the rise of corporations. I don't have anything negative about these large corporate practices as long as they're good practices.
Yeah.
But it's a capitalistic society, and what you're going to find is, are there some bad corporations out there? Absolutely, they don't run their business very well.
Right.
And they won't survive, and the patients won't stay with them.
Right.
But they're smarter now. And more of them are doing a good job.
Yep.
And since more and more dentists aren't wanting ownership, these are the same people 20 years ago that would have been owners.
Right.
They take pride in their work.
Right.
They serve their patients, and they do an incredibly good job. There's going to be some corporations that do incredibly well. And again, if it weren't for that unlimited supply of dentists, they couldn't do what they're doing today.
Because in the early days of that rising phenomena, they were really kind of had to take the bottom of the barrel, so to speak.
Yep.
You know, and
Yep.
and that got them a bad reputation with the public, and people didn't have nice things to say about them. But A, they got smarter, and B, things changed, like you said. You know,
and corporations do certain things really well.
They do.
Okay, I mean, they pick an incredibly good location. You look at a corporate practice, they'll be right on the corner of the busiest street in town. They know that, to start with, a great practice foundationally needs a great location.
Right.
I mean, one that's freestanding, one that they can see, a lot of traffic, you know, and they tend to position that right where women are. If I was going to pick like a strip mall to be in, I'd want Starbucks right next door to me. I'd want the Whole Food grocery store, at the end of the deal, a dry cleaners, a jewelry store, Ace Hardware, nail salon, and 2 or 3 restaurants, right? Because that's where women are.
Dress shop.
Exactly. So these corporations pick great locations. They have incredibly deep pockets, and they understand how to market to consumers. Now, they may not understand dentistry necessarily.
Right.
But they do understand consumer buying practices and stuff. And so they're going to outmarket you. They also understand what the patients want. They want their practice, the practice they choose, to be in network for their insurance. They want them to have consumer hours, which is going to include Saturdays and sometimes Sundays, okay, late and early. They're going to want dentistry for the whole family. That's why these corporations are picking up all of the specialists and putting them into a corporate setting, because now we're seeing the death of specialties in an independent practice. Because again, 20, 30 years ago, if an endodontist got out and he had 12 to 14 offices referring the endo to him, because no one did endo, they had it made.
He had made a good
Now
living.
it takes 40 or 50 offices to do that. Where in the United States could a specialist set up and even possibly have 50 other dentists that might refer to him? They're not going to refer much anymore. Or a prosthodontist. Are you kidding me?
And maybe 20-25% of those other 50 dentists work for one of these corporations who already have their own specialists.
Yeah. So again, the game is changing. We have to adapt and do it. So part of that is competing with them on hours, consumerism. You can't do that with a solo doctor.
That's right.
Okay. So, they have great location, deep pockets, they market well. They understand key practice indicators. They run their practice by numbers. Okay, they look at it, then they make strong, definitive decisions to do this or do that. They don't just procrastinate or wait for that, to change or something. They're always looking to upgrade their team. Okay?
And they do a great job of training as well.
Better than any solo practice I've seen. You look at Heartland, they have an incredible infrastructure of training.
Right.
Now, they have the same problems you and I have about longevity in millennials, in a job and stuff. We all have that type of problem. But they're kind of like the doctor in Dallas, I won't mention his name, that hired his staff from Hooters. And what he wanted, because he had his highest staff on it, turnover, he just wanted to have a dental assistant school in his office so he could pick of the litter, and so it didn't matter if they turned over, okay?
Yep.
So they've got that dental assistant hygiene type of training center that they do get pick of the litter. If somebody leaves, they've got someone standing in the lurches to come in there.
That's right.
In different locations. So if someone moved, like you're in Heartland and you moved to Dallas and you've been in Atlanta, they can tell you where the Heartland places are.
Yeah, they'll send you there.
Yeah. And we also have insurance companies that are kind of like corporations. They're forming their own dental practices.
Yeah.
So
under the radar.
Yeah.
Completely under the radar.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything else in general about the profitability of the practice?
Yeah, a little bit. I know that we've written about the details of marketing. We've spoken about them and stuff like that. But one of the reasons that we're struggling is supply and demand. We've talked about this before, that there's not as much work to be done on the newer generations. And the baby boomers are getting to the point where they're either, dying off or they've gotten it fixed, okay? We can't replace that group. We're replacing it with numbers for generations, but they don't have the same needs.
Right.
Okay, so that's that. But what we haven't talked about is the commoditization of healthcare. And this started in pharmacies, it extended over into vision, it extended to medical deals. All of these hospitals are for profit, and if you're not associated with a particular hospital, you're not going to make it in a solo medical practice. So commoditization is creating I don't know if it's really an illusion, but creating the illusion that a crown is a crown, a cleaning is a cleaning, and if insurance companies and corporations can convince the public that it's just a crown, okay, and the public is believing this.
Yes.
And if if you've got 75% of the population walking around with some form of dental insurance, every time they go to an out-of-network doctor, they get a letter from the insurance company stating that if you had gone to an in-network dentist, by the way, here are 5 offices that have 5-star ratings where this guy's a 3.5.
Yeah.
You would have paid X number of dollars less. Because, dude, a crown is a crown. Now, you and I know this isn't true, okay? But, I mean, I think the consumer as a whole can't tell the difference between a great dentist and an average dentist. It's really, as you say, when a case present, it's emotional.
Yes.
Oftentimes, if you don't hurt them and you do it on time and you show up and you act like you care and that's more important than whether that was a 3 micron or it was open. I mean, they don't know how to judge that side of it. So consequently, I've had patients from doctors that I thought were excellent and because they had such a big practice, and you're kind of going, man, their dentistry is not that good. But that's not what, if I had a list of 10 things that drove
Right.
excellence in dentistry, clinical would be at the bottom. I mean, and I think that's necessary. It's got to be as good as you can do it. But all these other things would come first in a consumer's mind. And corporations understand the commoditization and take advantage of it and try to be convenient in so many ways to make sure that people come see them.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, again, we're old enough to have seen this start, then they stub their toe and they go away for a while, and then they
reorganize.
They
and
reorganize and get smarter, and they come back and they do a little better.
Yep.
And this last time that they came back, it's done nothing but go up.
Right.
From this last time that they came back.
Yep.
So to think that it's going to go away anytime soon,
Yep.
if ever, I think we're past that point. I think we can safely say that it's not going to go away.
Yep.
Unless something happens and half the dental schools close and they lose their supply of dentists, they're here to stay. And I think it's your job as a solo practitioner or as even a small group practice.
Yeah, and corporations include almost every one of us.
To learn from the things that they're doing well and try to replicate those, except take it really to a level that they can't quite get to.
Like the time it takes to get internal referrals
Yes.
and really wowing the patients every time they come in, and even when you meet them on the street, okay?
Yeah.
They can't do that. And so, but again, I'm going to learn from anybody I can learn from. I've taken karate for 40 years off and on, and it's like anytime that I had to fight somebody, I wanted to look and see, what they look like, how they led, what they like to do. Most people are comfortable with 1 or 2 things, and it's like, what are their weaknesses?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting to be a real good student at something I don't understand or I don't do well, but I'm really good at analyzing what they don't do well and figuring out a way to capitalize on their weaknesses, not necessarily competing with them on their
On their
strengths.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of the strengths the corporation have now become the minimum standard for even being semi-successful in dentistry.
Yeah, and when they were in the early years, when they were buying practices, they were basically entertaining all comers, right? Because they were just in a fast growth mode. They're not that way anymore. They're buying really good practices, right?
Right.
Big practices or not, but they're looking at the profit, and they're the biggest thing out there for now as far as selling your practice. So keep that in mind. At some point, there's a good, you can say all the bad things you want to about them now, but when you get ready to sell your practice and they're the only buyer, you might not be saying quite so many bad things about
these
them.
younger doctors are not realizing that if they don't become owners, that in a corporation, the profits don't go to the employees, they go to the shareholders. As an owner, if you can be successful at integrating all these things we're talking about, you'll have passive income profits that not only be valuable at the end of your career, they're valuable every minute of your career.
Right. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to stop, and good luck with increasing the profit in your practice.